Welcome to OSM, Operation Safe Mode, Rerun Tuesday. Peace be with you. It's hard to believe it's a year ago already that we were speaking of Safe Mode saints. And of our very first Safe Mode saint, of course, was St. Joseph. We did 2 years ago in March. But as we approach this first week of January, we have two great American saints, St. Ann Seton and St. John Neumann. And I spoke to you last year about them in regards to how they were safe mode saints, how they helped in us through the pandemic. I was really hoping to be able to do this opening and speak differently than I listened to the video, and I can't, because it seems the pandemic is now taking another turn, and we really don't know where we're going with this new strain. And what I say in the video will probably be, unfortunately, true for us now and maybe even months to come. Welcome to OSM, Operation Safe Mode. Peace be with you. Happy New Year. As we climb into the year of 2021, there isn't a soul that isn't glad to have a new start. But yet, so often the consequences of years past are always a part of our new future. While we're still working through the coronavirus, while many are lining up to receive the vaccination, and some of us are already in the herd, waiting for life to return to us, we do begin a new year. And as we begin this episode today, I would like to dedicate it to my father, Robert Moineau, because I'm going to speak to you, as I have done so many other times, about his two favorite saints, the first two saints of our Americas, and why they are so important to us even today. Well, first of all, when we turn the calendar to the new year, we prepare to celebrate the Feast of the Epiphany, as we spoke of in our last episode. But once I was in college, my father always went to daily Mass, and the two feasts that we look forward to in that very first week were the Feast of St. Ann St and the Feast of St. John Neumann. They were the two first saints of the United States of America. They were canonized in 75, 76 in order to celebrate our nation's bicentennial. They were my father's favorite two saints because he prayed to them quite often for healing. He also loved them because of their relationship with Catholic schools, the Holy Eucharist, and especially because he could visit their shrines. St. Elizabeth Seton, obviously in Emmitsburg, and St. John Neumann in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So what I would like to do is just speak a little bit about both of them. I've done this in the past, but I want to do it again in how St. Ann Seton and St. John Neumann, even today, call us to that basic, important, grounded faith that will get us through even these times as we continue in safe mode. First, I would like to talk a little bit about St. Ann Seton, whose feast day is January 4th. When we began Operation Safe Mode way back in March, we took time to introduce St. Joseph as a safe mode saint that could help us understand how to keep each other safe in the faith, in the Lord. And as the time wore on, we have changed in our reality of the coronavirus. Yes, we continue to practice safe mode by washing our hands and wearing masks and staying 6 feet apart. But it became very personal when loved ones that we knew had the coronavirus. And also the reality of the virus being present and being exposed to it caused us to do something that we really never understood and that was the idea of self-quarantine. Yes, it was one thing for us to choose to stay home and stay away from some of the events that would expose us. But the true quarantine, when somebody that we love was exposed or is sick, we needed to stay away and allow the virus to run its course. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton is a saint in safe mode. She teaches us many other things that I love about her so much. She founded Catholic schools, she was a convert, but it was her ability to work through 2 separate quarantines in her life, losing loved ones in the process, that makes her the person that we can pray to in our time of quarantine. If you've already experienced quarantine to this point, you know how difficult it is. If you haven't, I am sure, unfortunately, you will have your turn as well. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, before she was even a convert to the faith, experienced a time of quarantine. The word means 40 days. She experienced this first quarantine when Dr. Richard Bailey, her father-in-law, was put in charge of yellow fever and those who were suffering from it. Because he was the principal doctor, they had to quarantine for 40 days so that they may stay safe. Unfortunately for Dr. Bailey, he did contract yellow fever, and she watched him die from such an illness. And then not too long later, her husband, William, as they had traveled to Italy, they needed to quarantine because of yellow fever again. And this time, her husband contracted it, and he died as well. How hard it was for her to be married for such a short time, but now have to suffer the loss of her own husband. She speaks of those days of quarantine with great emotional distress. Let me just read to you a quote from that time. Mother Seton says, "My eyes smart so much with crying, wind and fatigue, that I must close them and lift up my heart. God is our all indeed. If sufferings abound in us, his consolation also greatly abound, and far exceed all utterance. If I could forget my God one moment at these times, I shall go mad." This was when she was quarantined in Italy in 1803. The simple reality from Mother Seton that she teaches us about quarantine is if we forget that the Lord is close to us and that we're staying safe in him, we will truly go mad. The anxieties, the fears, the loneliness, and even the sense of being held captive could overcome us. I know that so many people are struggling from loneliness. I know so many active people who, even though they can work from home while quarantined, ask themselves the simple questions. What is my life really about? And how will we overcome these things? Mother Seton tells us that her eyes burned with those tears. Remember, every tear burns our eyes with sorrows, but also clear us to have the vision to remember that if it wasn't for our consolation in our Savior, we would truly be lost. So I speak in this moment to our loved ones who have lost family members through the coronavirus. As we desire to know God's love for us, let's desire more so the consolation that comes, that knowing that those who belong to Christ, even in tragic times, even the loss of life, promises us more in the resurrection. Mother Seton becomes a safe mode saint, the saint of quarantine, because this part of what we're suffering is probably going to be the hardest, for we can see the end is near. but yet we need to suffer so much more. So through the intercession of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, who knew that our Lord was her great consolation, let us ask her to help us as our patroness saint here at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, as the patroness saint of our country, to remember us, to bring to us peace, so that in times like these we are forged into men and women like herself. Also, I would like to speak just a little bit about the next day, which is the feast of St. John Neumann. St. John Neumann was a priest in the Diocese of Philadelphia who became the bishop. And when he became the bishop, he felt very inept to be a leader of the people, for he was much more willing and desiring to serve them as a pastor. But what he realized as bishop, he could inaugurate new ways for the people of God to come together to learn in faith and in devotion. To learn in faith, he knew that we had to make a school system for Catholic studies for our children, so that they could learn the faith day to day and be able to live it out in their family homes. He also knew that the devotion to the very thing that we are in Jesus, in the Holy Eucharist, had to be the center of our young lives, as that we are formed and forged into Christ. So he began the practice that we've come to know as 40 hours, Eucharistic adoration, an opportunity to specifically come to remember who we are in the bread of life. As we turn the page from the birth of Christ into his baptism, St. John Neumann reminds us that it is the Eucharist is the source and summit of our lives. He would be quoted later, much later, in our generation by the great St. John Paul II, who would remember that it is in these humble devotions that we find Christ, the one whom we count on, as St. Elizabeth Ann Seton said, to give us consolation, or we would surely go mad trying to live the world without his presence. So, if you ever have the opportunity, perhaps maybe after this pandemic, to visit 2 shrines, one in Emmitsburg, Maryland, to see St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, or in the heart of Philadelphia, to see the little bishop, John Neumann, I would encourage you to do so, because knowing saints and visiting their shrines give us the confidence to continue to stay safe in the Lord. So as we begin 2021, I know that we will be together again, but led by great men and women who have suffered much on their own behalf, can give us the lessons that are necessary to stay safe in the Lord. Just a quick note, just to remind you, if you're watching this early on Tuesday, that we will be having a very special Mass Tuesday evening to honor both of our saints and have an opportunity to be blessed with the relics of the saints that we call safe mode saints, our 2 great American saints, the saints that I'm really depending on in intercession for myself and for my own health.